Welcome back to microeconomics class. In this class, I'll be solving this question on market structure. So the question goes thus. Study the diagram below and answer the questions that follow it. Here is the diagram. On the y-axis here, we have cost and price in US dollar, 15, 20, 30. Here's the origin. On the x-axis here, we have outputs in units, 10 unit, 20 units. Here we have marginal cost curve, which is constant at 50 US dollar is also equals to 80. So we have marginal revenue curve, which is downward sloping, and below the average revenue curve, which is equivalent to demand curve. And here are the questions to answer. The first question says, determine the profit maximizing price and output of a monopoly. If you look at this diagram represents the entire market. If it's a monopoly, so it represents the entire market. Why? Because in a monopoly, there's one firm, and this firm also represents the entire market. So if you think of it as a perfect competition, mind you, the perfect market. If you treat it as a perfect competition, that is as a perfect market, mind you, in a perfect market, the demand curve is also downward sloping, so it's not horizontal. It is the demand of each firm in a perfect market that is horizontal, not demand of the whole market, not the market demand, but demand of each of the firms in this market. Okay, so here this can also mean the demand curve for the market under a perfect market. Okay, now you see why I have to explain this as we move forward. Now, we said the question says determine the profit maximizing price and output of a monopoly. That's assuming this diagram represents a monopoly. So, what is profit maximizing price and what is profit maximizing output level? So, let's go. So, here is the solution. So, it's very simple. You have been following me. So, it's very simple because we have learned related things in the past. So, determine the profit maximizing price and output units, we need to recall the condition for profit maximization. That is the profit maximization rule. Profit maximization rule. So for a monopoly, say MC is equal to MR. Although whether it's a monopoly or a firm in a perfect market, the condition remains the same. But here we are asked to determine the profit maximizing price and output under a monopoly. So let's see what will be profit maximizing outputs and price. So here you can see this is MR curve and this horizontal line represents MC curve. Where did they equal? Is where both curves intersect. This MC curve intersects with MR curve at this point. So meaning that here is the equilibrium for the monopoly. So the equilibrium price will be the price corresponding to these points. But we are not going to take this price because this is not the demand curve. This line is not the demand curve, it's AC curve. So from the equilibrium, we trace the line, dotted line until it touches the AD curve, which is the demand curve. Then we now trace it to the price axis. So in other words, the price of monopoly will be 20 US dollar. What of the quantity? The quantity will be the corresponding quantity, which is 10 units. Now, B, we are done with A. B, the price under perfect competition. This is a market, not a particular firm in a perfect competition, not a firm in a perfect competition. So we are going to treat it as a market. Okay, the first one, monopoly, we treat it as a market. Okay, and also as a firm. Why? Is it possible? Because in a monopoly, there's one firm and that firm represents the entire market. That is easier. But here, we are talking about a perfect competition, a market, not a firm in a perfect competition. That is why this demand curve is downward sloping. So what of the supply curve? You remember that in a perfect market, the price is determined by the intersection of supply. That is, the intersection of the demand and supply curve will determine the price in a perfect market. Now here is the demand curve. Okay, in a perfect market, what of supply curve? Mind you, you are told that the portion of marginal cost curve above the minimum point of average variable cost represent the supply curve of a firm in a perfect market. Now, if that is so the addition of the marginal cost above the average cost of all firms in a perfect market will represent the entire market supply. So in other words, see this as the entire market supply in a perfect market. Okay, this is the supply curve and this is the demand curve. This is where they intersect. Therefore, this is the equilibrium of a perfect competition. So in other words, the equilibrium price in a perfect competition, the equilibrium point is here, because in equilibrium, the firm will maximize profit and the price. So how do you know the price? This is where this dotted line touches the demand curve. Can you see touch demand curve at this point? So if I trace it to this side, so my equilibrium price at that point is 15 US dollar. So what of the equilibrium quantity? The equilibrium quantity will be the corresponding quantity here, which is 20 units. You can see, therefore, in a perfect competition, the equivalent price, the profit maximizing price is $15, while the profit maximizing quantity is 20 units. Now, the next question says, that is C, says, what total profit under monopoly and also perfect competition? Okay, perfect competition, not competition. Okay, all right. So I'm going to do that here. So the profit under perfect competition of monopoly first will be equal to the total revenue of monopoly minus total cost of monopoly. So what is the price of the monopoly? So before we do so, the total revenue of monopoly is the price of monopoly multiplied with output of monopoly. So what is the price? So price is 20 multiplied by 15. Okay, that gives us 300 US dollars. 300 US dollars. Now you see, what of total cost of monopoly? Total cost is simply AC, that is the average cost of monopoly multiplied by the output of monopoly. So how do you get the average cost of monopoly? Mind the average cost is the same thing as ATC and is represented by this horizontal line. Okay, and look at this equilibrium. And if you trace it, you trade this in equilibrium, you will see that average total cost is exactly at this point. Okay, if I trade to this side, I will get the value for average cost. That is 15 multiplied by the output, which is 10. So this gives me 15. This gives me 150 US dollars. Okay, 150 US dollars. Can you see that now? Okay, therefore, we have the profit of monopoly will be 300 minus 150, which is equals to 150 US dollars. That is the profit under monopoly. Also, let's calculate the profit under perfect competition. Profit under perfect competition. Now, let me do that here. The profit of perfect competition will be the total revenue under perfect competition minus total cost under perfect competition. So don't forget the total revenue of perfect competition will be the price under perfect competition multiplied by the output under perfect competition. So that's what the price under perfect competition, don't forget, is 15 US dollar multiply the output, which is 20. So this gives me 300 US dollars. Okay, now what of total cost of perfect competition will be AC of perfect competition multiplied by the output of perfect competition. You will see that at this point, you have the corresponding cost because this is the line that represents ATC curve, which is also known as AC curve. So we have 15 multiplied by 20, which is also 300, okay, US dollars. Therefore, let me do that here. The profit of the firm will be 300 US dollar minus 300, which is equal to 0. For perfect competition, okay, the profit is equal to 0, while for a monopoly market, the profit is 150 US dollars. And don't forget to like the video, drop a comment, also share the videos to benefit others. Don't forget to follow this page. Thank you. See you in the next video.